Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning into the Lone Wolf Podcast. I have two guests here today, Lisa Peffer, and I also have Renee Johnson. How you doing?
Good.
Good out here in New York.
Yeah, well, I hope your weather's a little cooler up there. We're burning up here in South Carolina, but they're coming on the show today. They've done some work with the MPP, of course. If you've watched the Lone Wolf Podcast, I've had my criticisms of the MPP. Brought other people on to share their version of the events. So, both have reached out. They want to give their version of what they've experienced inside the MPP. I'll be asking questions as we go just to try to get, the most information out there for the audience. But that being said, who wants to start? Who wants to take the floor first and just give your version of what you experienced in the MPP and what your opinion on it is?
Well, maybe I'll start first because Renee stayed longer, so she could probably fill you in after I left. I joined MPP right before their August convention last year, but I really joined MPP as a volunteer right after that. I was having some trouble getting in their Slack, and the first thing I noticed within the first a couple of days, where a few people were kicked out and people were asking why in their Slack workspace. And they weren't getting any answers except they had NDA and they couldn't speak out. So that was a red flag. And I already heard some stories. I don't remember his name, DJ Elf. Is that what it is?
Yeah, Ed Lee, DJ Elf 7. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was already hesitant coming in, but I was like, I'd rather see for myself than just kind of hear what everyone has to say. And within the first month, there really wasn't anything going on. I was reaching out to my regional and just heard nothing. Reached out to Jerry Perez, since I'm a veteran, and I would join his veterans group. And he was the one that got the ball rolling for me to on board. And he connected me with Phil, the regional coordinator, and just kind of from there. So by then it was October. And still really not much going on. So you're looking at probably close to 2 months now. Month and a half maybe is more accurate. And then two more people left of significance. One of them a CC member and one of them a longtime volunteer. And that's where I was kind of like, things are, something's up here. And what really got me wondering like what's going on, I know in one of our media and messaging meetings we had, once those two people had left, because they left within a few days of each other, we had two meetings and they were both with Nick Brana. And our one meeting, we were kind of talking about what happened. And it just didn't seem right, the reasoning of why the person had left. And then shortly thereafter, that's when that second volunteer left, who was also a CC member. And that's when I was kind of like, what's going on? So I started going to Jerry Perez, like, hey, I've been here this long. I'm not doing anything, but I'm always showing up to these Zoom calls. I have experience. What's up? And he informed us at one of our veterans meetings that a petition would be coming because we kept hearing more people were getting booted. One of them was retaliated against because of that second volunteer leaving. They thought they had something to do with it. And then fast forward to November, I think it was the 11th, we brought the petition to the coordinating circle, which is the CC. And it seemed okay at first until they accidentally spilled the beans that they knew about the petition, but the whole call for an hour and a half, they pretended they didn't know. So that would have saved us a lot of time if they would have just said, hey, here's what we're doing to fix the problems. That's not what happened. So there was some back and forth for the second meeting, but we met with Nick Brana a few days before, just a quick Q&A, which really didn't clear up some things. And that second meeting towards the end of November, they decided last minute they didn't want us to control the Zoom link because they didn't want it to be recorded. So they had us wait for over 2 hours while a mediator and someone from the petition group went back and forth to try and figure out what to do. And yeah, that was very telling to me to a lot of people. And I think it would be fair to say a lot of people left after that one, or at least lingered around long enough before they decided to leave before mid-December. And the thing is, even at the time, we weren't asking for anything exorbitant. We're asking for transparency, bylaws. How are the finances, how are they running? Who's making those decisions? Where's our donation money going? So we're asking, like, let us help you, because we're just sitting here not really doing anything while simultaneously getting accused of not doing anything.
Right.
So I could go on and on, but we had a third meeting before I left on December 15th. And it just seemed, we were promised bylaws by that time, and they posted it in their MPP Slack workspace. Instead, they gave us an operating, standard type SOP type thing in its place. And again, everything was just the same. Nothing changed, no bylaws, no nothing. And by that Friday, we found out we were participating in Force the Vote, which was news to people in the media messaging group. I mean, I am part of that group and everything else, which was part of the problems, because they're top down, apparently, unlike what they said when we joined. So we never knew things until they told us to do it, like an order. So that caused a lot of turmoil in their Slack workspace. And we were told, I don't know the verbiage, maybe Renee remembers, if you don't like it, go home, like leave, or something to that effect. And that was my thing. I didn't care that we were doing Force the Vote, but this is generally how things were found out. You're told. And then if you don't agree, I mean, we're supposed to be the People's Party, not like, I just thought that was my thing. After almost 8 weeks of back and forth of no change and very little progress on very major issues, and everything being pushed off to their convention in the second half of 2021, which is not announced yet, I left. And Renee stayed, bless you. So maybe that's where she can pick up to explain what happened after.
Yeah. So Renee, let's hear what you've got on this, because
you can see me like rubbing my head. This whole thing is so exhausting. So aside from everything that Lisa just explained, I was actually not really waiting for someone to say, okay, this is what you should do, go. And the funny part is, the reason Lisa and I even started talking was because she made a comment on the Discord about New York not having a hub. And I was like, New York has a hub, and they definitely have one, because I run the weekly meetings. What are you talking about? And it turned out that the information was just really not being disseminated properly. So we were, as a hub in New York City, meeting every week. We expressed, somewhere in like October, that it was kind of silly that there were all these people in New York State. I mean, people always talk about New York City. New York City is the smallest portion of New York State. New York State is humongous. And so we started opening the meetings to people who were not just in New York City, because it just seemed to make more sense to be inclusive of people in the entire state. We were asking probably what turned out to be the wrong questions about, what National was going to be doing to support whatever efforts we were making within New York City, or if we had decided to do anything within New York State. They never seemed to have any answers to those questions. So I was very kind of leery about what was going on, because it just seemed to me that an organization that was forming a political party that started in 2017 should have a little more information going towards the end of 2020 about what they should be doing. So that was a concern. And then as time went, I was just getting more and more annoyed. We couldn't get access to an email. It took weeks for us to get access to what the Facebook page, was going to be. It was just like this constant struggle to get information. On the other side of this, I was also part of the Black Voters Circle. We met actually also weekly. I couldn't always do the meetings because they were on Sunday nights. And there was a lot going on on that side as well, because we were discovering that as the Black voters for People's Party, the expectation was that we were just going to bring in other Black people and that we weren't really going to be doing much else besides like outreach and talking to other Black people. To which the question was, okay, but what are we talking to them about? Like, you don't have a solid platform. You don't talk about reparations. You don't, like, there was so much information missing and we couldn't figure out what it was exactly we were supposed to be telling other Black people to do with regard to MPP. So that was, that was a problem. And then that kind of fell apart when we were directed, well, the person who was running the meetings was directed to have a meeting with Puff Daddy's group to, create some kind of partnership, I guess. And what they were actually told was, go ahead and schedule the meeting. And then Nick and another white person, well, Nick's not actually white, whatever. He's white presenting, so whatever. We're gonna sit in on the meeting between these two Black groups. To which we were like, why are we meeting with other Black people with the two white people watching in the corner? That doesn't really make any sense. What is going on here? And so that, that caused a little bit of an issue. And, when that was when I learned that the petition was coming and that it had been written. And, I really was prepared for it because there were so many conversations that were happening behind the scenes about the things that just were not making a lot of sense. And so when I had access to read the petition before I signed it, like Lisa said, to me, it seemed really, really logical. Like, these are all things that for an organization that's over 3 years old should already be in place. So if you need people to write all of these things down in order to force your hand for it to happen, then, okay, I'll be part of that. But, this is not rocket science, right? Like, we're not asking for things that are totally unreasonable. At that point, there was a lot of back and forth. There were the meetings that Lisa discussed. I actually had a phone call with Nick. There was just so much going on, and it was becoming very clear that, the people who were running People's Party from like that central national circle really weren't interested in input from other people. Like, I guess they had a plan and they knew what they wanted to do, and they were not really open to all of these suggestions. And I think what essentially happened was all of the pushing, instead of it being responded to like, okay, you know what, these are great ideas, these are things that should be happening anyway, it kind of took on this tone of, we got this, we know what we're doing, we've already started all these things, we wanted things like simple things like, how about a handbook that explains like the stuff that people are supposed to be doing when they join in a hub? How about that? How about we get some written direction about, what we're supposed to be doing? And the answer was, oh, no, well, we already started one. And so they released their version of the hub handbook. Do you remember this thing, Lisa?
Yeah, the one that was not done.
It was like pages and pages of just words. And I was like, okay, this is great, but this does not actually give direction. It doesn't help anybody with the way this is written. And I volunteered to help to adjust the manual so that it was something that people could read and digest and actually get information from. And, I was told, well, you can fill out the Google form. And I was like, well, I'm not going to fill out a Google form to correct the 15 pages of word vomit. Like, that's not going to work. So just forget it. As time went on, there were conversations between those of us who signed the petition and, the members of the CC who were continuing in the process. We agreed as a group that people who were just sick of MPP and didn't want to deal with them anymore and didn't want to have any part of it anymore were going to move off of our Discord and start whatever they wanted to start something else. So they were going to move to Gilded, and we kind of split up. Because reasonably, me as a person who was trying to do the right thing and trying to stay in the organization and trying to see if I can push for change in ways that was going to make sense, I didn't want to be bombarded with conversation about let's do something different. Like, I didn't have time for something different. I was still trying to fix MPP. So I was actually selected as one of 4 people who were going to continue to speak with the CC on behalf of the larger petition group, in hopes that that was going to alleviate some of the stress that was being caused during calls and, you know, to help ease communication. And probably 3 days after we started to reach out to say, okay, these are the 4 people that you're going to deal with. This is how we're going to manage this so that we can have like clear communication and we can really plan how we're going to move forward, what's been done, what still needs work, blah, 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 blah. I woke up in the morning and I had all of my access to everything cut.
Jeez.
So, yeah, so that was interesting. You know, I had to email, I didn't have access to anything. So I was like going through my email to see if I still had email addresses for anyone that I had, you know, been meeting with for New York. And I sent an email and I was like, okay, guy, I think I got fired. I don't really know what's going on, but I don't have access to anything. And, you know, they were sending out these posts on Slack that, you know, people were causing problems in the Slack and they were out, you know, getting out of control, and they had to, you know, this abundance of caution. And I just realized in saying that, Lisa, I skipped over the whole I'm white, but I can use the N-word thing.
I knew you were getting there.
So I just, you know, there was just so much. And you know, to me, the audacity of the whole thing was I was running the New York weekly calls, right? I pulled together the agenda, I sent out the notes, I updated the notes, I set up the base camp, I set up all the projects in base camp. I was like, you know, and I don't believe in saying like I was leading this thing, but I was helping to coordinate it and trying to make sure that everybody was able to have a say and participate in meetings and do the things that we wanted to do. And we had decided as a group that we were just going to try and do like a New York State based MPP. We were going to do actions. We were going to try and do things that were more community and locally focused and state focused, because we didn't know what national was doing. And New York State is not a go get a piece of paper and a bunch of signatures to be a party. You have to run here. You have to run for governor. You have to get a significant number of votes in order to be on the ballot. And when we asked in November of 2020, and this was when, you know, like everybody knows now that Cuomo's like garbage, but, you know, this was when Cuomo was still relatively popular and people thought he was doing a good job and all these things. And when we asked, you know, what's the plan for running someone for governor if you're really trying to get access in ballot access in New York, and there was no answer. They didn't, you know, they said, well, maybe in like 6 months we'll have, you know, a better idea. And, you know, we were all thinking, well, in 6 months, that's not like you're going to take on Cuomo in 6 months. Like, what, you got to start building this thing now. And, you know, it just didn't go well. And so, you know, there's all this stuff happening and I wake up and I have no access. And you know, the night before I was telling white people, like, you know, I appreciate free speech, but it's offensive to me for you to think it's okay to use the N-word. And I don't want to have a fight about it. Like, I don't want to have a conversation with you about why I don't want you to use the N-word. Like, I'm asking you, like, I'm telling you, it's offensive to me. I don't want you to use the N-word. And, you know, given the historical reference for it, I think that should be enough. Like, I don't think it should have to be a back and forth in a conversation about why that's inappropriate. And furthermore, for MPP to decide that the 4 Black people and 1 white person who were saying this is inappropriate, that they could all leave. But the white person who was calling people class trader and race trader and all that stuff would be speaking at the next, volunteer meeting, that I think that says a lot, and, but, if you ask Nick, I play the race card, because apparently I shouldn't say these things out loud, but I don't have, I've got no way to support being racially insensitive. Like if you're going to allow racial insensitivity to happen within your workspace when Black people have to survive through it, like I'm not going to have you back on that. Just no.
Yeah. First, the whole waking up and having your access cut, this sounds very familiar. I don't know if you saw the last interview I did with Joe, who, she had a very similar experience. Just all of a sudden one day her access was cut from the MPP. It's crazy. And you bring up the whole thing with white people using the N-word. And so I'm gathering that they were trying to justify that. Right. So that's absolutely batshit in my opinion. I'll say this, I've heard that debate like, well, if Black people say it to each other, why can't other people? To me, I say it like this. There's white people who refer to other white people as white trash. I've heard, Hispanic people use derogatory terms for Hispanic people towards each other. The thing is, you can laugh at your own pain if you want to. But I look at it like this. It's not right for other people to use those terms, in a derogatory way, even if they're not necessarily using it derogatory. We know what the root goes back to, for example, if I did something really stupid, shot myself in the foot, and I wanted to sit around and laugh about it for the next 10 years and make my own jokes, that's on me to do that. But it's inappropriate for you to sit around and then joke about how I'm an idiot who shot myself in the foot. That's just rude. So for a people's party, they don't seem to be very considerate of what people who don't agree with them think. That seems to be the one thing I keep gathering about the People's Party, or this movement for a People's Party. That they tell you, like Lisa said, they tell you what you're doing just out of nowhere. First of all, People's Party, how many people like to just be told things out of nowhere? It just nothing I'm hearing about this party lines up whatsoever. Furthermore, Renee, you made a good point. When you're trying to appeal to, say, Black voters, what are you trying to appeal to them with? That's something else that Joe kind of brought up when she came on the show. They don't really set a core set of issues that they want to run on. I think I might have heard them talk about Medicare for all at one point here, this or that, but they don't really go into core issues that are going to affect the everyday man and woman in the country, right or left. Jobs, foreign wars get kind of close to home for a lot of people. Reforming the criminal justice system. I mean, there's a lot of things you're going to get common ground on, and they don't want to focus on them. They just go out and talk about how they're going to do such great things, and I don't see them taking anything seriously. I really don't, but I mean,
I agree. And that's what, I mean, as of late, I think I've really, I've really been focusing on some of the things that they tweet about, because I see these things that they're tweeting, and it's almost offensive, right? Like, you're tweeting about things, but you're not doing anything. I don't want to read you, getting at AOC about whatever. And not that like I'm a huge AOC fan, like she's got her own whatevers, but I also don't live in her district. So I don't need really to love her. So you know what I mean? But I just feel like this constant focus, like their whole focus is let's pick at other people. And I'm like, people don't know where your money's going. And when people unsubscribe from your mailing list, they still get emails. And you keep telling people that you have ballot access in states where all you have is a piece of paper and you have to collect signatures. And you're, posting votes for your members about things that you've already announced that you've done. Like, nothing about them is significant or real. And, it's like this constant barrage of like just nonsense. And I'm like, stop shit posting and do something. Like, do something worthwhile. Like, even that, you remember they were going to raise money for Texas. Do you remember this whole thing? But when you went, after the storms, but when you went to donate the money, it was like the MPP donation page. And I was like, well, why it was going anywhere? Why are we doing it that way? Why didn't you just set up a separate, like, listen, I make websites. It's not rocket science, right? Like, it takes about 10 minutes to create a page that redirects, and, like all these platforms, you're on Action Network, like they'll do it for you. It doesn't take a whole lot of effort, but why not set it up so that people are clear that their money is really going to Texas? Because you announcing to me that you raised $5,000 and you're going to split it, like I'm supposed to take your word for that? Like, we just trust that's really what happened. Like, this is not right. Like, this is not how a group that is presenting themselves as, the antithesis and the exact opposite of the Republicans and the Democrats. Like, that's not it. Like, that ain't it.
And I think for me too, like right before I left, and Renee, you'll remember this, even though you weren't at the meeting, a week or two before I left, in our media messaging meeting, it wasn't the People's Party vision. It was quote unquote Nick Brana's vision. Oh. That was the verbiage. That was what we were told. And even really crazy things like, from this meeting was, well, we don't believe in Medicare for all. And we're like, what? We believe in a Medicare for all, not the Medicare for all. So when we go out on social media, we have to say this versus this. And it's like, there's only one Medicare for all. No one's going to get that because they believe Medicare for all doesn't go far enough, which, okay, cool. But no one's going to get that when you say it that way.
Yeah, some people might actually read into it the opposite way and think you're trying to, pull some AOC type shit and move in the opposite direction. I'll say this, Renee, you were pointing out with like their page, they couldn't even set up a simple redirect to give to like an actual fund taking up money for Texas. It just went to the MPP, and there's certainly something sketch about that. I came up months ago when my man Franco from Frank Analysis was having some issues with MPP stuff. And I told him then, I said, to me, it sounds like MPP is a movement for a phony party. Based on what you said just now, I think we've got another acronym we can use, because what they're doing, if that doesn't sound like politicians, like give us your money, we're going to put it towards this, and then it goes to nothing. So like you look at these stimulus bills they've passed up on Capitol Hill recently that were supposed to help us such a great deal, right? And we get what, $600, $1,200, $1,400, whatever, right? And if you look at the amount of spending that goes into those bills, you could have given every person that got a check, a lot more money. So that being said, we're going to take their word for it. They're going to divvy it up, right? So, to me, it sounds like they're really reading the handbook 101 on how to be a politician. So I think we've got a new one: Movement for a Politician's Party. That's what it's sounding like here to me. I've had my suspicions on Nick Brana in particular. The first thing that kind of caught my radar, being an independent especially, was when they had their little social like Zoom convention or whatever, when they were first trying to get this whole thing off the ground, and they invited people to be there to speak. I remember, I think Nico was one. I think Jimmy Dore was invited, but apparently there were some rumblings behind the scene that they had to get their arm twisted to invite Jesse Ventura. Now that surprised me. That really surprised me. And here's why. Okay. No disrespect to Jimmy or Nico House or anybody else, but if you're pushing for a third party, who is one of the most prominent third party people out there? Maybe the guy who actually ran independent third party and actually won an election, won the governor of Minnesota. That's a pretty big deal, is it not? So maybe you want to talk or hear from the guy who has some experience in beating the Democrats and Republicans. But if you got to have your arm twisted to invite that guy on, that's sketch to me. That's sketch. And they certainly, in my opinion, haven't, at least from what we've seen or I've heard, tried to reach out to him and recruit him. Like, where are they on that? I mean, he's a solid independent. You go watch some of his clips. He goes on Piers Morgan and makes a jackass out of Piers Morgan to the live audience. He gets the audience behind him. He knows how to rally people. That's how he was successful. It's kind of his tricks from pro wrestling. He cited that. He's like, I know how to work a crowd. So if you're a people's party, I think Ventura is pretty well in tune with people's issues. If you listen to him, why are you not trying to recruit people like that? Again, it seems to me like this is just Nick Brana's little child to make himself feel better that Bernie Sanders didn't win the Democrat primary. And so this is way of trying to cope with this whole damn thing by saying, I'm trying to do something here, but if you got to agree with me or you can't be part of this thing. This is just to make me feel better, to cuddle up to my Bernie pillow at night and sleep a good night's rest. I mean, what do you think?
Yes to all.
Well, there's also, and I can't reveal too many sources, but just know my understanding is Ventura will not take any calls from MPP. So.
Yeah, that's why we're kind of like.
We were both like.
Hey,
I mean, right?
I'm not privy to such information, but it wouldn't surprise me. And just from the kind of vibes I've gotten off of Nick Brana, it doesn't surprise me at all, honestly.
Yeah. And, one of the things that I was surprised by, and, to date, no one can give any verification that this is not truth. So I'm just going to go with what I have seen verification of, which is that, Nick has really used his, what was it? Director of National Political Outreach, right?
Yeah.
Position with Bernie Sanders as, kind of evidence that, he knows what he's doing and he did this thing for Bernie. But a little birdie sent me to a website by Bernie's campaign in which it clearly states that Nick Brana was incorrectly noted as political outreach director and was actually an unpaid intern. And so, I've asked the question multiple times, and up to now, I have seen nothing that disputes that fact. And so you have to wonder, were you actually a director for political outreach for Bernie Sanders? Because Bernie Sanders doesn't seem to think so. And that's like on the Bernie Sanders staffing list. And it's not like a fake way, it's Bernie's information. So you have to really question what is going on. And, when I discovered that, it really, brought to me my concern with a lot of the people in the national circle. I don't have any evidence that they actually know what they're doing. There are a couple of people who do have, a background in the circle or the working group that they're in charge of. But there are also quite a few people that I'm like, well, what were you doing before you joined MPP that made you an expert in this particular thing that you're now running for this national organization? I don't know. I don't see it. And when you ask those questions, it's not taken well and it's not responded to well. And, my thing is, if I'm not telling the truth, then prove me wrong.
Right.
Put it out there. Discredit me. Do something. Show a receipt. Give an email, a resume, a pay stub. Something.
I mean, it's fair to say anything we've ever put out there, we have backup of. Now, and I think it's also important to note, we didn't come out talking about this first. Nick Brana did. Annalise Garcia did. We didn't put out a statement on our 90,000+ Twitter. We didn't share her statement. We didn't go on Lee Camp. We didn't talk to Jackson Hinkle, the guy who defended MPP yet has no actual connection, yet he's friends with them. So yeah, we're going to defend ourselves if we have the proof that shows that we're not lying. And a people's party that is, going after the duopoly, making all these claims on how they're going to be totally transparent, but yet lack honesty and integrity. It doesn't matter if they don't get money from PACs or corporations, if they can't even stick to, the truth.
Yeah, you pointed out something real good there on the end. And I've made this analogy when I've gone on some shows in the past, whether it be talking about AOC, whether it be talking about MPP, kind of changing up. But, I always hear this like, well, they're not taking money from corporate PACs or, super PACs or whatever, so they can't be corrupt. I've heard people like Kyle Kalinske make that argument, for example, about people in the squad like AOC, right? That is such a crazy argument. If you're telling me that because they're not taking the bad, dirty money, that they can't be doing the deed of these people, that's crazy. I mean, that power and influence can run beyond what they're giving to you officially through campaign contributions, first of all. I mean, anyone who wants to deny that, will wake up. But furthermore than that, I equivalate it to this as far as analogies go. What is the difference between a slut and a hooker? One's at least got enough sense to take the money and get paid for it. That would be the people like Chuck Schumer who are taking the money to do the bidding of the greedy, as opposed to AOC, who doesn't take the dirty money, takes your money and then turns around and contributes it to those people who are taking dirty money to help them win re-election. So that to me is the difference. They're both doing the same thing. It's just one's at least smart enough to at least take the money. Okay. That seems to be the deal here too. If you're going to tell me that MPP, because they're not taking this bad money, has to be on the right path, that's a very narrow way of looking at it. And I think it's missing a lot of nuance into that whole argument. And furthermore, there's people who still defend MPP. And I'll say this, to be fair to Jimmy Dore, okay, I feel like he's looking for some alternative to the two-party system. I haven't talked to Jimmy. I've watched his interview with Frank Analysis. The one thing that I will say about the whole situation is this, okay? I heard Jimmy try to say that there were some bad actors who were kicked out. I'll respond to that by saying this. If they were bad actors, then explain to me why these bad actors go on Frank Analysis, air their case, and then Frank Analysis opens the door to Jackson Hinkle, to, Nick Brana, to Annalise Garcia, and says, hey, come on, and we'll let you air your side of the story and give your rebuttal. And you know what they do? You know how many times they went on and gave rebuttal? Not one damn time. No, they blocked him.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, we know.
So that's the response. How can you call the people who were necessarily kicked out bad faith actors when the people in charge don't respond well to criticism, number one, and then number two, won't even go on shows to rebut what's being said about them? They give no rebuttal whatsoever. You can't call the people who either left or were kicked out bad faith actors. It's very clear you've got these, DNC light people who are trying to run this whole thing. They're trying to set it up just like the Democrats, just like what we heard about the shenanigans with the Green Party, even, for example, right? There's no alternative here. And as much as I want to see a third party try to gain some traction, even a quote unquote people's party, I've been pushing this unity thing. There's no sense in swapping out a case of AIDS for a case of herpes. We are screwed up. The two-party system is screwing us over. I have no need to get rid of one problem only to take on another. If they're not going to do things the right way, then that's not even an alternative. It's a waste of my damn time. That's how I feel about it.
And that's kind of like what we've run into is, you know, when we get opposition, just for us speaking out like the truth of what happened, it's, well, we need a third party, or it's, you know, they clip up these news articles. Third party is a time and out, or even there were petitioners that did end up staying even after everything that happened. Kind of like, well, maybe we could still maybe help change things, even though they know they lied, this, that, and the other thing. But at the end of the day, you have to draw a line. If they're doing the exact same things that they are accusing the GOP and Dems of doing, how is that changing anything except keeping things more the same? And how do you run a people's party when you treat people like this? It's, you know.
Yeah, if you want to run a people's party, you might want to take notes on how to better interact with people. That's number one. Number two, something that you pointed out, Renee, and I meant to mention this before. You pointed out that apparently Bernie Sanders' website doesn't exactly give Nick Brana all the fame he is claiming over here. You know, I just want to kind of clear the air on this here. You know, there's these people in the South. I don't know if you've ever traveled down South very much, but if you've ever looked when you come to the South, there's these people, they're the rednecks. They buy the pickup trucks. They put the lift kit on them. They jack them way up in the air. They do all this crap. And, you know, the rest of us, we look at that and we say, okay, there's the insecure redneck who is really trying to compensate for something. Are you telling me that is Nick Brana is MPP's version of that insecure redneck who's not, you know, just satisfied with his manhood? Is that what you're telling us? That he's got to he's got to inflate his political titles to seem important to us?
Renee, what do you think?
Yeah, that's probably fair. I mean, you know,
he's got to feel like a man before he gets cuddle with Bernie at night.
The reality of these things, and it's funny. So I sporadically listen to Jimmy Dore, right? I'm not like a big Jimmy Dore person, but sometimes he says things and I'm like, oh, that's just so true. My mother loves Jimmy Dore. She thinks he is hysterical and she loves that he does not like pull punches, right? And, you know, my mother's like, she's almost 70. She's a Jamaican immigrant. So you should hear her like quoting Jimmy Dore. It's pretty funny. Anywho, my issue with Jimmy Dore, with Susan Sarandon, with Justin Jackson, I know that they want this thing to happen, right? It's why I signed up, right? Because I also wanted this thing to happen. What I want all these people to do is be honest, right? Like they're on advisory calls where terms like race card are being thrown around, right? They're on advisory calls where Nick is literally selling them on the idea that I am being paid by a Democrat outfit money to destroy MPP, right? Because this is, you know, because the Dems are putting money into destroying an outfit that has 89,000 followers on Twitter. But how about deal with the facts of the situation, right? Like, how about address my question about the state of California? You need 80,000 signatures in the state of California, which means you really have to go probably for like 125,000 to ensure that you get the right amount of signatures. You also have to do a caucus. You have to caucus in order to even fill out the paperwork and say you're going to try to be a party. And during your caucus, you have to elect state officials to represent your state party. You tell me, if MPP did that, do you think they would have advertised it, shown something like, hey, we caucus, these are the state people? Instead, They're selling people on this. We're gonna be a state party. You just have to sign up, right? And then when you go to sign up, this like we're gonna be the ballot access, right? You could sign up in California for Donald Duck's party because it's literally a box on a website. Like you click other and you type in whatever you want to type in, right? So they're going to get 125,000 people to participate in this process in one way or another, right? In a state where you still can't verify that you did the caucus that you were supposed to do, in a place where you booted out some of your state reps because they were asking too many questions. What part of that makes sense to somebody who legitimately is putting like their name and face on it? So listen, you want to stick with them because you think this is the best bet for you to do a third party thing? Like, okay, like I can't, everybody's grown. Everybody got to make their own decisions. You want to do what you want to do, but do it with your eyes open, right? Like I've said it. I had a very clear statement to Justin Jackson to him. And I was like, brother, you got to do whatever makes you comfortable, but just know that you're doing it with clear understanding of what you've gotten yourself involved in, right? Because everybody has to do what makes them comfortable. Me, I am never under any circumstances going to associate my name, my time, my energy, my purpose with Movement for People's Party because they're a waste of time. They're not going to get anywhere. They're going to do this campaign, they're going to have a slate. It's mid-May. Do you know how many people have already announced that they're running in 2020? You do a podcast. How many states already have we're running. I mean, you can't even keep track. They're collecting names now to start vetting people. How's that going to work?
And by the way, couldn't even secure Nina Turner to run as one of their people.
Right. Because, because when she wins, she's going to switch.
Sure.
Listen, I don't know Senator Nina Turner. I respect her. I paid for her podcast. I think she is phenomenal. I hope if she wins that she continues to be a voice that's real versus doing what happens apparently when people get down there. But I knew she wasn't going to do that because it doesn't serve her any purpose to do that. It's not going to help her to not run under one of the two parties, right? Like it's just not political sense. So even when they were announcing it, and they were still saying it after she signed on with Justice Dems, after she signed on with Workers' Family, they were still saying, well, maybe Nina. And so to me, like, if you're even saying that out loud, how am I supposed to take you seriously?
Yeah. Well, at the end of it, I mean, it's like I said, it seems to me like they're just doing this in some way, shape, or form to try to keep themselves feeling better about whatever. But simply the fact, this is not going to be a true people's party. If you want a people's party, I got news for you. There are people who lean more to the right in this country. Now, they can't even keep the left together. How in the hell are you even going to go about recruiting the right? You can't even unify the left that is tired of the Democratic Party. You're not even going to be able to make headway with the Republican Party. You're not going to pull any going away. You're not going to be able to you can't get the Green Party to come over. How are you going to win over the Libertarians? Okay. The Libertarians are going to look at that and say, I got a way better chance to continue voting for the Libertarian Party right now. We've already got more ballot access than you guys have, and they stick to what my core values are. So I'm just going to stay over here. I mean, and so here's another thing, and this is a problem with the third party process. We need a third party, but at this point, we're entering into territories where we've now got really 4 parties, not to mention MPP trying to stick its head in through into the game. You've even got lesser known parties still, like the Constitution Party. There are multiple third parties. And the problem is we need unity. We need the people who are tired. We need a lot of the independents. You're not going to get everyone. There's always going to be fringes who are just not going to be able to agree on those core set of issues to win elections, and then work on your disagreements once you take power away from the status quo. You're not going to recruit everyone. So that's the first thing people need to understand. But you've got to bring the sides together. There's a lot of issues. I kind of hinted at them again. I've mentioned them multiple times on my show. Just talk to the average man and woman. You'll see what matters the most to them. Taking care of themselves, their family, and their health come really at the top of that list. And I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, Green, Libertarian, Independent, whatever. I mean, that's a priority on pretty much everyone's mind. And the fact they're not really running a good campaign on that, or, and you guys can tell me if you've ever heard this stressed, they're not really focusing on too many state elections, are they? I'm not talking necessarily like Congress or the Senate. So I've said this. I think third parties go about this from the completely wrong way. Typically, you see all this influence being an effort on the presidency, right? We want the presidency. The president is not a king. If he takes office and has no backbone to support him at Capitol Hill, he or she is a sitting duck. They'll get nothing done. They'll be gridlocked into oblivion for 4 years, all to try to make them look like shit so they'll lose the next election. The Democrats and Republicans will gladly screw the whole country over if it means trying to protect their own parties. So you've got to take away power at the House and the Senate. That's going to be key. Then you also hear the argument against third parties as to why they can't win because of the way state elections are set up. Well, to reform that, you've got to win state legislators, right? You've got to win the state house. You got to win the governor, okay? Once again, we know an independent out there who became a governor, and how's that working out? Couldn't even get him on board. He won't take their phone calls, apparently. So that's just ridiculous. But again, no effort that I'm hearing on that. So you need to reform the election laws to give third parties a better chance. But tell me, you guys were part of these calls. How much talk did you hear about focusing on this and actually playing the chess game? Because to me, it seems like they're trying to play checkers when this is a chess game.
And that was one of my big concerns. So we actually in New York, and I think it was just luck of the draw, right? Like we had someone who was considering running for like a council seat. We had someone who knew Zephyr Teachout. We had someone who, you know, was very active in the Green Party and knew some people who were going to be running again to like reseat themselves in different districts. So, you know, and New York is crazy because you have the New York State stuff and then you have the New York City stuff. Like there are a lot of politicians in New York, like way too many. And so, you know, my argument was, I don't understand why everything is coming from national to tell us what we're going to do in New York. Like there's no one in that national circle who resides in New York. None of them, right? So Nick Brana living in his parents' house in Virginia cannot tell me what's the best way to get somebody in the forefront in New York. Like he just can't do it. And my big argument was, you know, what you should really be doing is trying to help people set up their state parties and let the state party run and figure out where the seats are going to make the most sense and where they can maybe pull somebody in because it's a district where only 3,000 people vote anyway, and maybe you can sneak somebody in there. Like there are plenty of ways to win the local politic race and start to make real change from, you know, from the actual community standpoint, from, you know, smaller districts. I mean, there were people who signed the petition who part of the reason they got involved was because they were planning to run in their district and they were told that, you know, CC and MPP didn't really have an interest in helping these local local people do their races. And to me, that's ridiculous. If you have someone who's volunteering in your organization who already has like a fire to run and to do something, why would you not want to support that? And even if it only results in you having, 5, 10, 15, whatever, smaller level politicians in local places and council seats, whatever, they can build a base. If they do the right thing, then all the people who supported them are going to support whoever their party is. That's how you build a party. You don't build it from Nick and 8 other people sitting around on a Zoom call and making decisions about what's going to happen in the rest of the country. You build it by allowing people the space and the freedom and the ability to run themselves and to get themselves in a position of power, because that's where it's all going to come from. Said it over and over again. Over and over again. And people I don't know what it is about this idea of like being the person who made the third party work that is so like tantalizing. People are dying. Like literally, people are dying every single day because they don't have health care, because police officers are assholes, because they lost their job and they can't take it anymore. Like people are dying every single day. What do you think fighting to get 15 people in Congress and a president in 2024 is going to do for all these people who need help right now? Like, go do something. Go start a food drive. Go start a clothing drive. Go help people feed the homeless. Go bring blankets to people. Like, what the fuck? Like, what is going on? I don't understand, like, how we got into this place where everybody's so busy wanting to be popular and wanting to be known and wanting to be, known for doing this thing that they're not even doing the fucking thing that they're supposed to be trying to be popular for. Like, what is going on? And it's mind-boggling to me, and I don't want to be politicians suck, right?
Yeah.
Like, they suck. It sucks the life out of you. God bless people who are really good people who say they're going to run because they want to do that thing. They want to be the person. That ain't me, right? Like, I have no interest in doing that. But I'll go bring blankets outside. I'll go bring food. I'll go stand somewhere and talk to people about things they need to worry about. They're trying to shut down Kingsbrook Hospital up the street. Like, there are plenty of fights to fight in your local area. And to me, that's what people need to do. Like, all this nonsense, like, we're gonna take over the Democrats. No, you're not. You're not. That's not gonna happen. Like, help people fix what's going on in their own communities. And maybe in doing that, you can actually build a real base of real people who are willing to support you when you decide to run somebody. That's what would work. But
yeah, I'm going to completely agree with that. And I'll say this, as much as I have hope for a third party, as I said earlier, I'm not going to just take some little handout as a solution and say, well, what the hell, we'll take a gamble here. No, if we're going to have a third party and we're going to have a people's party, it really needs to be a people's party, not decrees coming down from King Nick and his little dick over here. Okay. We don't need that. Okay. We've got to have a true coalition if it's going to happen. And if that isn't going to be the case, then, honestly, I advocate even trying both. Society might have to start making the changes on its own. If the political game becomes too rigged, we can't get anything done with a third party, then, sometimes you have to go outside the lines of, voting. You got to get out in the community and actually start doing something. That's what the protests are there for. That's where you exercise other parts of your constitutional rights to try to get a change brought about. Okay. It's been said multiple times. Even Elijah Muhammad said, you can't rely on a politician. Okay. You can't rely on that. So if we can't get the third parties together, and I'll be honest with you, Ventura himself said trying to gather independence was like trying to herd cats. So unless we find the magical cat herder somewhere, it's going to be an uphill battle. Right now, there's the mainstream media. They divide the right and the left so far apart that it's even hard to get together and have these kinds of talks, to even sit down and talk about the issues that you agree upon. And if you do, it's also been my experience, the first time someone on the other side brings up the subject that they're going to disagree on, instead of saying, let's just set it to the side, it becomes the priority and everything falls the hell apart. Just like what we're seeing right now with Nick and the MPP and Annalise and all that. When the petitioners come along and said, this is what we disagree with you on and we want change and this is how we feel, King Nick comes along and just says, no, get the fuck out of my MPP kingdom over here. Okay, you're making me sad. I can't cuddle with my Bernie pillow tonight. Get the fuck on. Okay.
I will say they pretended for a little while like they were listening, and we had a few meetings and they did the thing, and we hear you guys and we're listening, and they did the whole thing, and they did change a few things that were for the better. Like, God knows those national meetings with just Nick, like going on and on and on and on. Like, the petition was one of the reasons that changed, right? They started bringing on volunteers and other people to participate and to talk. So it wasn't just like a few voices, and they did do some things, but the real stuff, like the real nitty gritty, like where are your bylaws? Because how can you not have bylaws? And why do people have to search through the IRS records to figure out what you're doing with your money? Like these are things that, to me, this is not like, it's not rocket science. This is not stuff that should be a battle. And that was where, they kind of drew a line and they were like, we'll get to it when we get to it, or, when we have our convention, which, by the way, my understanding is it's Black Friday this year because, doing a national convention on Black Friday is a good idea.
Great sign, right?
And so, supposedly they're going to do all these things, like, okay, but, it's May 21st and you haven't announced your slate for 2022 that you're supposedly going to run, and like, I just don't even, I just can't, like, I want so badly for this to, like, for people to just be like, you know what, that really doesn't make any sense, because it don't make no sense.
Well, not only that,
reasonable.
Yeah, and not only that, another, besides all this, we had a lot of like the transparency, the bylaws, because bylaws would have fixed a lot of issues. It would have answered a lot of questions. Like, we don't even know when these people voted themselves in, 9-10 people voted each other in. How long ago was that? Like, it should be, an annual thing. In some states, bylaws are required, federally even. So, one of the issues, kind of like what I mentioned earlier, volunteers were disappearing, don't speak out because of an NDA. And I would assume that practice still continues, because their answer to us was, well, they broke community agreements. And I'm sure Renee can speak on that, considering they sent it to her even when she was gone from MPP. They sent her the email that she broke community agreements, even when she wasn't with them. So they can't even explain their process when they're questioned. There's no proof. There's nothing. They just kind of do whatever. And there's no protection for volunteers. There's no process. There's, it's just whatever they decide, you're gone. If you ask reasonable questions, you're gone. And that is a problem. And, I don't understand. This is like, we would have to keep reminding them, we're trying to help you. We're not, that's all it was. We're trying to help you improve the party because we want this to work. We could have just left like everyone else had. And I mean, that's on them for that. And then, everything else that snowballed after again. So I'm at a loss, because it just seems like, to me now, and even to me a couple of months ago, and as this has kind of evolved and progressed, it just seems like they're building something, but not really. It's like being built to fail on purpose, because they're not really getting anything done. Not really. I didn't see anything, not really, when I was there. Like I said in the beginning, I was mostly just attending Zoom calls. I have a lot of experience and stuff they needed, but I was never getting contacted, never getting back to or anything. So the way I see it, Nick Brana can win even if they fail, right? Because he's on everything. he's in the news or whatever, the Hill or whatever. He knows all these people, these celebrities. Whatever he does, even if it fails, he can do it again.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree. I think at the end, he's really kind of boosting himself along here. It's an unorganized mess. It's a waste of time. I will say this. If they're at least going to be holding this thing on Black Friday, are they going to offer good discounts for people to waste their money? I mean, that's the question I got to ask. But that being said, I know we're running a little short on the time here. So each of you take a moment.
I pushed back my my
okay.
So we have a little more time.
Okay. I was going to say
it was worth not cutting you short.
And take the take a moment. We pretty much established MPP isn't a viable option. There's other people who are going to debate, maybe libertarians, maybe Green Party, but for those who feel like they have no home in sight, they're tired of the duopoly. They're not satisfied with one of the two parties they've seen so far, or don't know that overtaking one of the current third parties that exist is a good option. They're like, what do we do? I know, Renee, you kind of touched on getting into the community. I hit on that a little bit, but just tell everyone, what you think we need to be doing to try to make some kind of change and some kind of progress here. Because there's a lot of people who are going to hear this potentially and say, I thought this might be the hope. And now I'm just feeling like shit because I'm like, we're right back to square one.
And I really think the community thing is important, right? In every community, there is somebody who needs help, something that is going on that is going to give anything to somebody who needs something. Like, it just, there's no escaping it, and I think really, like, focusing on politics and electoral stuff, like, it's just not useful, right? Like, in the end, anybody who was like, oh, this is going to be the thing, should really just take a step back and think about what Congress has done in, I don't know, the past 6 months that's really served you a purpose, right? Like, even if you got your stimulus check, right, you were probably suffering waiting for that thing to come through, and the minute it came, it was gone, right? Like, it was spent probably the minute it hit your box. Like, they're not helping anybody. So I think it would help everybody to find something in their own community and to find someone who's doing something in the community that's going to serve a purpose. The conversation about, like, left and right is so interesting to me because I have no interest as a Black person in trying to convince white people not to be racist, right? Like, I ain't got no time for that. There's way too much other stuff to do in life. But if you're a white person who doesn't want to be racist and you want to have a conversation with me, I'm open to doing that because I feel like those conversations are worth having.
Right. I
also feel like part of the problem is that everyone has been convinced that race is the problem, right? And so because of that, you can't ever remove racism from the problem because people who are racist because they think that I'm the problem, right? Like, so you can't remove racism from the conversation. And I feel like these conversations, like what they call, the long talk in politics, like, if you're going to run for an office, you shouldn't be waiting until it's ballot season to have conversations with people in your community, right?
Yeah.
Before you even start that process, you should be knocking on doors, having conversations about what people need, right? Why is this person sleeping on the street around the corner every day? How come the pothole down the street hasn't been fixed for 20 years? How come I don't have internet, right? Like, these are conversations that should be had. So I think something that people could do, and people are going to think I'm crazy, but this is what I really think. I think people should have conversations with their neighbors. I think people should be gathering data. I think people should be talking to each other and figuring out within their community, what is it that we need so that we can all have something better, and figure it out. Like, be the person to help. You don't have to be a politician to say, like, we're going to do this thing so that, you know, I can buy a vegetable without having to go 3 miles outside of my community. Like, there are things that people can do to engage each other and to work together and to build something that's going to be beneficial to everybody that's surrounding them. And I think that's what people should be doing.
Absolutely. And if I can add one thing, and then Lisa, I want to get your thoughts here. You brought up talking to people and talking to your neighbors. And I, for one, don't think you're crazy at all. That's something people used to do more commonly. And it's something that's lost. And there's a lot of people out there who feel the same way. I've said this about the people who wrote off a lot of the Donald Trump voters and said, oh, racist. He triggered emotion in a lot of people. I don't care what you thought about Trump himself. He used what he did to his advantage. There's people who look back at a point in time where society wasn't so at each other's throats. The mainstream media wasn't promoting such fear and hatred the way they do today, where immediately race always comes into the equation with whatever story they run nowadays. The way they go about things just harms society. And between that and social media, talking has become a lost cause. And there's a lot of people out there who miss those old days of just being able to talk to people. Okay. They miss the days when they could have a job that had a pension with it. Okay. There's people who miss those days, and he capitalized on that 100%. So talk to your community. I'm going to kind of paraphrase Tip O'Neill here a little bit, because I don't remember his exact quote, but former Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill, something like all politics starts at locally or something, right? That's how you really got to kind of organize this thing. Talk to your neighbors, talk to your communities. If there is someone listening who thinks they want to try to start the third party, or one of the current third parties gets a hold of this, you got to listen to the people who live in those communities to understand what affects them the most. Okay. That's how you're going to have any kind of success. As Renee pointed out, you live in Virginia. Don't tell me how things are in New York. Likewise, someone lives in New York. It's a night and day difference when you live in South Carolina. The cost of living is different. The situation around you is different. The people can be different. The culture is different. It's a whole different ball game. So, if you want to know what goes on there, listen to the people who live it every day. They're going to know the best. And then that's what I've got to say that. So Lisa, what are your thoughts?
I have to agree with Renee, because, I don't know if you know, Renee lives in Brooklyn. I live on the complete opposite part of New York. I live Republican area, conservative, libertarian. This is not like a Democratic progressive area. I am a progressive. So this is the area, if you don't talk to people and you tell them, hey, I'm a whatever, progressive Democrat, whatever, or even if you whisper the name Nancy Pelosi, the door is going to be shut on you. Like, this is that kind of town. And my whole family loves Trump. And I obviously don't, but I know my family, and that gives a different perspective. Like, some people in my family are worried about, where they're going to get their money. How are they going to get insurance? I had to help my uncle with, insulin years ago, and it's just insane. That's the type of stuff they're worried about. So when they hear Trump and stuff, when he would say everything he had to say, it hit a mark, because most of it was true, even though sometimes he would lie about things. But I think too, there's a problem with people wanting to belong, and that's not bad. It's just, we're also isolated in our homes, our jobs. We just don't have a life outside of working 40 to 60 hours a week. So when someone like Trump comes along and says, this person is the problem, or this is how I can fix it, it sounds good. I mean, really, it was no different than Obama. I mean, because if you remember when he came out in 2008, I mean, the world loved him. I remember watching him on TV speak in Germany. had nothing to do with US politics, but he was just that loved before he was even elected. So there is something about group mentality if you're telling people the right things. But if you're not following it up, we're still going to be separated. And, big media is really a big problem in that, because why does it, what does it benefit anyone if we all talked? If we did, we'd get more done, right? That's my thinking. People need to talk more and get, more on each other's level, because, people don't like to hear that the media lies, but they do, left and right, or they, don't exactly say everything the way as it is. And I think more people are waking up to that, even on the, the left and the right, but you still have this middle ground of, Republicans, Democrats, whatever, that are just blinded by their selective news programs or whatever. But if you get together and have a rational discussion with people who are, maybe are listening to one side of the story and not getting the rest of the information, that will change a lot of people's minds. I mean, even just asking, hey, do you think, does it make sense for us to pay X amount of money for insurance when we're capable and have really the money, or could find it, from our military budget or whatnot, to have healthcare? I think most people would agree, because, one narrative might be, for example, well, it's a handout. Well, that's not really true. We pay a lot of stuff we pay taxes for. I'm sure there's a way to make it cheaper. And so far from what I've seen, it would be cheaper in about 10 years. But there's also valid criticisms to that as well. Is that true? Is that wrong? Like, there's a lot of common ground I think people aren't exploring just because they're not talking to their neighbor. They're not talking to friends and family. I mean, we've all heard the news when Trump came out, people stopped talking to each other, marriages were broken. And, maybe in some ways that's probably a good thing for people to learn who they really are. But if you have, if this is how it's nothing's going to change if this is how it's going to be, where people are going to fawn over AOC or fawn over Trump. Like, the celebritism of it doesn't do anything to help us. So I think, yeah, I definitely agree with everything Renee said. And I think there needs to be more community involvement, more discussion, instead of this celebrity nonsensical and then all the other crap that goes with it. It's just, I think we're at this place in time right now that people are starting to wake up and realize, especially the younger generation, which is surprising, that people want change. People are not falling for people's bullshit anymore. And that's why I think even people on the left are even kind of calling out AOC and stuff now, because they said they would do certain things and they're not.
Yeah. And one thing I'll point out here, just to kind of add on to some of that. And, this is my take. Aside from the community activities you can do as far as charity and trying to give back that way, another thing that I've pointed out is what powers a lot of these politicians, where they're getting their money, their influence. They're being bought off by these rich corporations. Okay. And unfortunately, some of this blame has to fall back on society. So this is where society has to change. At one point in time, there were a lot more small mom and pop shops who were ran out of business by these big chains. The reason they were ran out of business, or one of the reasons, has a lot to do with because the American consumer tends to like the one-stop shop. Well, if you're tired of what's going on around you and you understand that people like the Walton family that owns Walmart, or Jeff Bezos is getting away with murder on his taxes, start looking for whatever alternative you can to get your things elsewhere. So I know Amazon's convenient for a lot of people, but if you see that thing on Amazon you want to buy, instead of ordering it through Amazon, see who makes it, see who sells it, go to their website. You could probably just buy it straight from them and take Amazon out of it. You might lose out on 2-day free shipping. Oh, I'm so fucking sorry. But would you rather lose out on 2-day shipping, or would you rather lose out on having any kind of chance of taking power back? Because as long as you keep putting money in their pockets, you're fucking yourself at the end of the day. Okay, they're going to keep getting away with everything they've gotten away with, and that's a way of letting your power that you do have, where you spend your money, have some effect here, and that's one thing that people can do as well. So, that being said, we're looking about an hour 20 here. I want to thank both of you for coming on. It's been a great conversation. I'll have links to the social media down below where you can find Renee and Lisa. Like I said, thank you guys for coming on. It's been great. Hope you can come back on later on. I'm sure we'll have something to talk about. Politics is a clusterfuck these days. So there's always going to be something to talk about.
There's always going to be something. And Lisa and I, we took this lesson that we learned, and we actually partnered up, and we're starting a nonprofit to try and do some change. And, so we'll keep you posted on that too.
That's great. Yeah. When you get it up and running, send me something over and I'll make sure we get it shared around for sure. So
awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for coming on. It's been
Thanks
great.
So much.
And again, I want to thank Lisa and Renee for coming on. If you like the video, give us a thumbs up, hit that like button. Also, if you liked it, hit subscribe and make sure you ring the bell or they won't tell you, when we upload any content over here. Also, drop your comments in the comment box below. We'll see you next time on the Lone Wolf Podcast.